We're going to move on to Stefania Ilinca. As you might have noticed, there's been a bit of a challenge in the last week with people travelling. The higher your job, the more complicated it has become. Stefania is currently the World Health Organization's technical officer. She will introduce and explain herself. We did a little pre-record on Saturday afternoon to be able to share her experience with you. Stefania, hello. Perhaps for the good people that are gathered here in Creative Brain Week, you can explain where you are and what you're doing today.
Hello, Dominic. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today and for giving me this space to share my experience. My name is Stefania Ilinca. I am a senior Atlantic Fellow for Global Equity in Branding Health, and I currently work as technical officer for long-term care at the Regional Office for Europe of the World Health Organization. Does that require more explanation?
A little bit. What does a technical officer for long-term care do in the WHO in Europe?
Well, first and foremost, I think the thing to explain would be what we understand long-term care to be. And in very broad terms, it refers to all medical, personal, social care and supports that people need to maintain dignity and quality of life as soon as they are at risk of or when they start experiencing limitations in functioning. So this is very relevant for people with cognitive decline and dementia, but it's also relevant for people who age into disabilities, whatever the underlying condition. And as a technical officer, well, I try to coordinate the technical work, developing guidance that WHO publishes, coordinating support projects in countries in the European region, and very much trying to advocate for improving access to care and support for older people, and really people of all ages who need it across the European region and the world.
And that means that you're working in very different, even within Europe, you're working within very different systems or countries will be at a different stage. How do you keep an oversight of all of that?
Well, oftentimes we say the European region and people think European Union, but in fact, the WHO, the UN European region, runs from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific, because it includes all the countries of the EU, but also many countries in Eastern Europe, like Belarus, like Ukraine, like the Republic of Moldova, countries in the Western Balkans, countries in the Caucasus, so if you Georgia, Armenia, Turkey, but also many countries in Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Azerbaijan, Russia. So it is a huge region and a very diverse region, and very much, as you say, at different levels of development, both in economic terms and in terms of the, let's say, generosity or complexity of their health and care systems, but also at very different points in the demographic transition. So we have one of the most young countries in the world in our region. This is Tajikistan, but we also have some of the world's oldest countries, Finland, Italy, for example.
Amazing. So they've got very different competing priorities for maybe the healthcare department or in the commercial world. So let's bring it around to Global Brain Health Institute and your engagement with that. And when were you a fellow? And you came to Dublin, I think.
Yeah, 2018. It feels much longer. It doesn't feel like it's been that long, to be honest. It's still very present with me somehow, and I feel very much connected to it. But yeah, it's been 8 years, incredibly so.
Amazing. Time flies, but you were in pre-pandemic then, 2018.
Pre-pandemic, exactly. The lucky pre-pandemic cohorts. We had an in-person experience, which I've treasured a lot, and learned to appreciate once limitations were in place and that didn't become possible. But in fact, my experience with GBHI was cut short by the pandemic. I was in Trinity on campus when the first restrictions came in. I took a flight home right before flights were blocked and was sure I'd be back in a few weeks to a month. And it took over a year before I could come back to Ireland, in fact.
It's amazing to think back about what actually happened and this little thing we're doing, thinking back to across the 10 years of GBHI and also starting to think forward 10 years. The unexpected is always going to be unexpected. I'm interested
Absolutely.
and we're asking everybody, what kind of things do you keep with you from your experience at Global Brain Health Institute? What stays with you?
As I said, to be honest, I feel fully connected still with the program, and I'm lucky enough that I am in regular touch with some of my fellows, with some of the faculty. But looking back, really, if I'm honest with myself, personally, the experience has been transformational, but professionally, it's been transformational as well. So maybe I focus a little bit more on that. The first thing that I think really made an impact was the clinical experience. I have a background in research. I've always worked with clinical data, with policy data, with economic data, very, very large data sets, but entirely remote from the clinical practice of care for dementia or anywhere else. So I had written articles about the care of older people without ever stepping foot in a care clinic or in a geriatrics clinic. So the experience of actually understanding what day-to-day care looks like, how it's organized, the pressure it puts on the staff that deliver it, but also how the experiences of care users look like in practice and what might end up being most important to them. This was something I learned through GBHI. And potentially also the fact that it is impossible and that we should not, even as researchers, even as policymakers, try to completely detach emotionally from the reality of care. We try to capture a lot with numbers, and there is a lot we can capture with numbers. There is something to be said for objective rationality, but it's important that we also acknowledge its limitations. Not everything that we can count and analyze with quantitative statistical methods is everything that matters. So I think I understood most from the GBHI experience how important the different perspectives are, how many types of approaches are necessary to capture them, and how challenging it is, in fact, to bring them all into the same policy discourse because they are not given the same weight. And then finally, in terms of leadership buildup, I've never lacked in confidence, but through the GBHI experience, I think I've gained a lot in through contact with truly inspirational individuals and learning from the leadership challenges and failures of others, what it takes, what kind of let's say personal strength and what kind of professional strength approach it takes to make change happen in the world and to deal with the constant failure and in trying to knock down that door.
Yeah, to stay sitting with it, I think, to stay sitting with the difficulty. Is that, for you, is that the personal development piece? So what about that? How do you work as a leader? How do you bridge the gap between the scale that you're expert in and work in and the understanding of what happens when the individual isn't abstracted by numbers?
Well, that's where it's hard to separate the personal and professional. And for me, my career, my profession is a very important part of my life. It's how I most identify myself as an individual. But yeah, I don't even know how to answer that question. I think the more I work in this field, the more I realize that it takes champions to promote innovation, to make change happen, but not only change, to make amazing things happen, to maintain good things. We try to put the structures and the system in place that can self-sustain, but this is rarely the case. And, we do regularly system-wide analysis of long-term care, of healthcare, and we always come back to the same conclusion that where there are local leaders, where there are strong local networks that are motivated and can advocate for and maintain sufficient pressure and sufficient investment, that's where good things happen. You try to replicate the same thing with a different set of people, you will not get the same result. And GBHI is very much a collection of amazing, motivated, diverse leaders from around the world. So yeah, it's this group dynamic, this creative and inspirational atmosphere that just by bringing these people together has influenced me.
That brings us very nicely into sort of where you are now. So you went back to the job that you're doing previously, or it changed a little bit? Last
No,
time we
no.
met, you were doing an analysis of Irish residential care. So where are you now, and also what are you taking into maybe the next 10 years, which is a good way to think?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, no, when I started GBHI, I had a research position. I've always worked close to policy making, so it was applied research, supporting development of evidence for policy for the UN Economic Commission for Europe. But it was very much a research job. What I do now is much closer to direct technical support to governments, so working closer to with policymakers in countries. And more on the ground. But GBHI was instrumental in that transition. It gave me the time to develop my profile, to develop my networks, but it also gave me the confidence that I can step in this role and that I can do something meaningful, because it was quite a change in role. And in no small part, I think the experience of GBHI and the experience of meeting people who are so connected to policy and to the desire of making an impact has motivated me to step in this role. What I do now, in fact, is enormously helped by my GBHI experience. For example, many of the experts that I've met in Ireland who have inspired me are now supporting us as international experts and are inspiring people from all over the world. Just next month, we're going to bring to Ireland a delegation from Malta, who is in the process of reforming their health and long-term care system and sees Ireland as a good practice example that they want to learn from. Even beyond that, the global experience and the global network that is GBHI has been so valuable to me. So even though my role is very much focused on the European region, I try every day with some success to reach out and to connect with other regions of the world, particularly with the Americas, with the Western Pacific region, and with the African region. And I learned the value of that by the enormously inspiring discussions I've had with colleagues from these regions that I know almost nothing about, but I've learned through GBHI how much there is that we can learn together. And that, in fact, while it seems often that we're worlds apart and differences are there, many of the challenges are really, really similar, and we could work together towards joint solutions. Next decade, I'd like to try to give something back. So I'm going to challenge myself to set more time aside to work with and for GBHI, and help in any way I can from my position now, coming and past fellows. And beyond that, I try to take the chance to advocate for dementia care in any way I can through my work, although it's no longer at the very core of my work. But I try to find room for it everywhere. And in fact, if we think creatively, it is an agenda that's flexible enough that we can align it with whatever happens to be closer to the top of priorities in the global health agenda at any one time.
Stefania, that's perfect. Thank you very much for spending time with us. I look forward to trying to get you.
I'm very sorry not to be there.
Yeah.
So here's a commitment. Next year, Creative Brain Week in person. I'll put it on the agenda now.
I look forward to it. We can talk all about the European presidency. We can talk all about the visit from Malta.
Yeah, there you go.
Thanks so much for the time. Okay.